We're going to start by looking at threading. So threading is one of the areas when it comes to sewing where you're likely to need to have to troubleshoot. The moment you get the thread the wrong way around, or there's a problem with the tension, it can have a really big impact on the quality of your sewing. So I'm going to teach you all about threads, how to wind the bobbin, how to get the right tension, and also what to do if there are any problems with your threading. So we'll start at the top of the machines. So in front of me, I've got two sewing machines. I've got a manual sewing machine and I've got a computerized one. Now, there are a lot of similarities between the two. There are a few differences, but I will show you how it works on both machines if it differs from one to another. So at the top of the machine, I'll show you the computerized one first. You'll see a spool handler, and on the manual one, this is another spool handler. So these ones are side loading. It is here that you would put your spool onto the spool handler, and these little things help to keep your thread in position. So these are side loading ones. Sometimes you get spool handlers that are upright, and your thread spool will sit on it like so. These are also very common on manual machines. Sometimes there are two positioned around here, but in this instance, this is actually an attachment that can come off. What's really important to note when you are placing your thread in your spool handler is for the thread to go in counterclockwise. So here there's an example of this is sort of blue thread, and what you need to do is make sure the thread is going up and around the back of the spool if it is sitting on an upright spool handler. So the thread's coming round anti-clockwise and around the back of the spool. On a side loading one, it's exactly the same, except you want the thread to be coming around the back and underneath. So you would place that on the machine like so. So what you'll notice with all sewing machines, generally speaking, is that there are markers along the top. Okay, and this will tell you where and how to thread your sewing machine. So generally speaking, your threads will go through a thread channel. There'll be a little metal bit or a plastic bit at the back of your thread channel here, and you will be asked to thread your sewing machine down through this thread channel and through your tension discs, which I'll explain what they are in a minute, along the bottom, up, and what you'll want to do is make sure that the threading hooks up and over the take-up lever, and then that goes back down and threads into your needle. And it's exactly the same on this machine. The only difference is that the guides are embossed rather than printed on, so they're quite a lot harder to see, but you can see if you can feel where they should go. And again, thread goes around the metal bit, down, up, over the take-up lever, and then down to the needle. What you also find at the top of the sewing machine is the how to wind your bobbin, or how to get your spool thread prepared for winding a bobbin. So in this instance, this is a Singer machine. In this instance, the threading of the machine through the thread channel and take-up lever is in a grey instruction, and the bobbin one is in a blue dashed line instruction. It's very similar on this one, but the dashed line is embossed. So what this is asking you to do, if I take this thread here, is prepare your bobbin this way. So you would, as always, prepare your thread by putting it on the spool, and you want it, if it's a side loading spool, you want your thread to be going around the back and underneath. Okay, this thread clicks into this little metal hook here, and what it's asking you to do is to wrap it around this tension wheel here. Okay, and that will get your thread in the right position to wind the bobbin. So when you're winding a bobbin, and this is a standard bobbin here, what you want to do is look at where there are holes on the discs, and we need to make sure that the thread is going between those two discs and up through one of those holes. So it will look like that, and you can place that onto your bobbin winder, which is this little bit of metal sitting at the top of your sewing machine. Now, in order to wind the bobbin, you need to click this into position, and then you need to press your foot pedal to enact the winding, like so. I'm holding on to this tail thread of the spool. So you'll notice that the tail, if it hasn't snapped off already, it's very wound, and that's fine. So what we can do is then release that, and then we'll snip it and snip that extra tail off. This is a Singer machine, and what happens with a lot of sewing machines, Singer is an example of this, is that as soon as you click the bobbin winder to set it to go, it disengages the needle from going up and down. On Janome machines, there are some Janome machines that require you to pull the balance wheel out, and then that stops the needle from going up and down. So if you're winding a bobbin and your needle's going up and down, there's a very high chance that you need to just pull out your balance wheel to stop that from happening. So you'll see that on this one it's almost exactly the same. You place your thread, you'll go around the tension wheels here, and then you will wind your bobbin on using this mechanism. We're going to now thread through your thread channel. So there's a little hook on this particular machine, and it's asking me, the instructions asking me to thread the spool through there. There's also a little bit of metal at the back, which I guess stabilizes the thread when it's going through the machine. So one thing that's really important to note when you are threading the machine is you always want to make sure that your presser feet are raised. Okay, and that's because it opens up the tension discs for which in which your thread will need to go through. So so always make sure your presser foot is up when you are threading, and we're going to go down, up and around, up and over the take up lever, and then we're going to thread it through the channel here. Now, with some manual machines, you will notice that your take up lever might not be visible, and you always want to have your take up lever visible when you are threading your machine, and all you need to do is just turn your balance wheel and make sure that it's sitting in neutral, and then what happens is that you'll be able to see this little bit of metal, it's called the take up lever, in which you can then thread it over. On the computerized machine, I'm going to do exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is pick up the thread, and I'm going to place it around this piece of metal. Again, it's stabilizing the thread, and again my foot's up and I've checked that, so I'm going to go up and around, up and over the take up lever and down to thread it through the needle. Now, because this machine's computerized, it has a mechanism which allows me to make sure the needle is up or down. So there's a button here that I press, and if I press it, the needle goes down to its furthest point, and if I then press it again, the needle goes right back up to its neutral point, and that will make sure that I've got I can see the take up lever there. So when you're threading a needle, it's really important to go from front to back, and it's also really good tip to snip the ends with some sharp snippers or sharp scissors, because means you don't have any excess fibre coming off the end of your tail. So one of the things that happens, one of the things you've got normally around the needle is a little hook at the top in which to place a thread, and that just keeps it secure when you are sewing. So if you do have a hook, make sure you're utilizing it. Okay, so I'm now going to thread the needle, so coming in from the front of the eye of the needle, and that goes then to the back. And obviously it's a little bit hard to do when you're upside down. There we go. Okay, now what you want to do is make sure that the thread isn't knotted. So if you've got an excess bit of thread and you've accidentally pulled the tail through the loop at the top, what will happen is that will stop it from moving freely through the needle. So it's really, really important to make sure there are no knots and that the tail part of the thread hasn't gone through that upper loop, because otherwise it all gets stuck. So this is now moving freely, and then you place it underneath the foot through the hole and make sure that there's a nice long tail at the back. So now we've got the top of our machine threaded, we're going to look at getting the bobbin loaded. So I've just taken the free arm off this machine, because actually this is behind the free arm is where the bobbin will be loaded, with a little flap there. Now this is a side loading bobbin machine, whereas this one is the bobbin is placed on the top, so it's a top loading one. There are a lot of similarities between the two. Not all computerized machines will have top loading bobbins, and not all manual ones will have side loading. They do tend to interchange quite a lot, but the principles of bobbins really remain the same. So now I'm going to talk you through the side loading one. So you'll see here that there is a bobbin case, and it's almost got a little handle, a little door, and you can open it up and that will reveal the bobbin case. So the bobbin case looks a little like that. There's a claw that sits at the top, and as I said before, it's got a little door, a little handle to release the mechanism. Okay, so when you're placing your bobbin, you're loading your bobbin into that, you again want to make sure that your thread is going up and over counterclockwise when you place it in your bobbin case. So this is the back of the bobbin case, and that thread's going counterclockwise. And then what will happen is that you can guide the thread around. There's a tiny little slit at the top, and then what you want to do is you want to pull the thread through, and it clicks into position right where this little claw is. Okay, so that's now loaded up and ready to go. So that then goes back into the machine. The claw can only go in one way, and it will click into position. You'll hear it click once it's in, and then you'll have your bobbin thread trailing along there. Okay, so I'm now going to show you how a top loading bobbin case works. So there's normally a little plastic case that can be taken off, and that will give you access to the bobbin case. So the bobbin case is actually not attached to the sewing machine. It's sort of placed inside a mechanism, so it has the movement that it needs to make sure the bobbin is sort of freely accessible. So again, you use the same principle, which is making sure that your thread is going up and over counterclockwise. Okay, and you just simply place that in the machine. Now at the bottom of the case there will be a little hook, so you want to make sure that your thread is guided all the way down to the bottom, and sort of you want to kind of gently pull it towards you and then up and over to your left, and that glides underneath a little hook, and once that's in, that's now ready to go. Now I need to get the threads talking to each other. So the principle of sewing is that you've got a top thread that comes down and a bobbin thread that comes from the bottom, and what happens is when the top thread hits a certain point, a hook comes round and hooks it around this thread like so, and that creates the stitch. And then once the hook has done a complete 360, it releases and it comes back again. So that's how sewing works. But in order for that to start working, you need to make sure that the two threads are talking to each other. So the easiest way to do this is by holding your top thread out to the left hand side of your machine. So you're gently holding it. You're not pulling it through the machine. You're just holding it so that you are able to control it. Now you're going to take your balance wheel and you're going to turn it, do a full 360, and you're going to turn it towards yourself to wind your bobbin on. Okay, so I've taken the presser foot off just so you can see the visual here. You don't normally have to take your foot off when you're doing this. So 360 all the way round and up, and you will see that when the thread is turned into a neutral position, that the top thread is hooked up the bobbin thread, and then you can pull that bobbin thread through, and there we go, that is now threaded. What's slightly neater about this one is that you can take the needle up, needle down button, which I think is that one there, needle down, needle up, and that pulls your thread through. I'm just going to replace the free arm now here, so that you have a nice throat in which to sew with. However, before I do that, there are a couple of benefits of having a free arm that can be removed. So not only does it hide where the bobbin loading station is for side loading bobbin, it will, as you can see, open up the underneath of your machine. So this means that if you are sewing something that requires a complete circle or a complete stitch all the way around, like a sleeve or an armhole, you can do that without having to feed everything through the top of the machine. So this is really very useful for precision sewing.